Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Business Podcast, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have Morgan Michael Bailey on the line, and he's CEO and founder over at Intrepid Coaching Group. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Pleasure to be on.
All right, so Morgan, I'm excited to get into today's topic. So using business as a force for good. A lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, executives listening right now, and I think many of them listening are going to tune this up because they want to know exactly your thought process on this. But before we get into that, I want to get a little bit further into what you're doing over at Intrepid Coaching Group. Tell us a little bit more about your company, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So Intrepid Coaching Group, we focus on purpose-driven leadership. And so we work with executives, entrepreneurs, and teams, building the capacity to get the most important things done. And that's both using coaching, workshops, facilitation, whatever is needed to grow the capacity of the individual and the organization to meet those goals.
What are the, just so that at the end of this, I'm going to ask you to leave a website or social media or really wherever you want people to connect with you at so that people can. What are the right types of businesses and or types of clients or niches that you typically find are a good fit for Intrepid Coaching Group so the right type of people follow up with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's less of the right type of person and more of the right type of challenge. So we work with a lot of organizations that are growing. They're facing challenges where people are moving into positions or leadership positions that they haven't been in before. And so they need to develop new skills. They need to develop a greater capacity in order to get things done. Now, that could be with a small business owner who all of a sudden is been like, hey, great, now I'm managing 10 to 15 people. How am I doing? Or it could be up at the executive level for an organization that has, 5 to 10,000 employees. So it's more of organizations who are going through some sort of change, and they have to invest in their leadership skills to get them where they're going. Because there's an old famous quote that says, what got you here won't get you there. So we help build the skills to get you there.
That's awesome. And I think that's a great transition. So let's get into using business as a force for good. Excellent topic. Where do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, well, I want to talk about this dichotomy that generally we think of we either do well or we do good, right? Mm-hmm. We either do well for ourselves and make money or we do good in the world. And I think common business knowledge has kind of split that into two different categories. But kind of what we're seeing right now, actually, in this very moment, is that businesses that focus more, not just on the bottom line, but also focus on their community and focus on the environment, actually tend to do better in the long run. And there's a lot of data to support that. Organizations who focus on what they call triple bottom line, profits, people, and environment, tend to outperform in the long term organizations that focus on short-term profit. So people may be like, okay, sure, but why might that be? Case in point right now, right? You look at, the world is kind of falling apart in many ways. Organizations are struggling. Organizations that don't have strong relationships and real relationships with their customers and all of their stakeholders are really struggling because people are like, well, if I don't have to spend money, I won't. But if there are organizations out there and companies that you really have a strong connection with, chances are you're still willing to support them. Not only that, or people who are working for those types of organizations, right? If you have, let's say you have an employee-owned company, now you have a collective group of people who are wanting this organization to become successful, even in the midst of financial turmoil. Whereas, if you're just a stock-owned company, and you have your shareholders, you furlough a bunch of people, all of a sudden you've just disenfranchised, your most valuable asset, which is your employees. And so when we start to look at how can we actually use business practices to both support the people who work for us, to connect better with our communities, and to safeguard the environment, we're actually creating a much more resilient and sustainable business model.
And so one of the topics one of the things you mentioned that I really like to highlight is that I think once upon a time, doing good and being a force for good was seen as as an altruistic, kind of endeavor, like it was more for the nonprofit space or other spaces. I mean, and rightfully or wrongfully, I think that was a perception of many, especially in the investment community. So when you think about like mutual funds or just other companies the way they were, and over time, though, as the data amounts, as you mentioned, it's no longer just that. Obviously, it's you should want to do good, but it's almost like even if you don't want to do good, which doesn't sound well or a good thing, obviously, but it can still be really good for business long term. So like there is now that's an incentive. It's not a trade-off anymore.
Yeah, the data's there, and now you're starting to see investment funds that are focused specifically on organizations that are meeting these sort of ethical and sustainable guidelines. And again, it's not because like, hey, we should do this. It's like it's actually good for everybody. And I think the key thing to mention here is it takes a mindset shift, right? Mm-hmm. We're kind of in a scarcity mindset. We're like, we need to make money. No, we need to cut with the bottom line. Like that's short-term thinking. And if we lived our life from short-term thinking, like, we're always just a step away from disaster. If instead we shift the mindset to be like, okay, I understand that right now this may hurt a little bit, but it's a good investment in the long term, right? And let's take, your employees, for instance. If you say, okay, well, I actually want to invest some money in training, or I actually want to give them some small time to pursue things that they actually find interesting. That little bit has, that interest that you're investing into that individual compounds in the long term and creates a stronger relationship between that individual and the organization, which creates more innovation, more creativity, and more loyalty. And the investment that you're putting in is maybe, let's say, $5,000 a year. But if you're paying this individual $100,000 to $150,000, and you think that, you're gaining 15 to 20% more productivity right there, you're actually looking at cost savings of $15,000 to $20,000 by a simple investment of $5,000, and this person is just a lot happier. So financially, it makes sense, and there are very specific business practices that you can do on this, which actually you can track to ROI. So it's not crazy science. I mean, it's a bit more of a science than it is than just let's do good things out in the world. But it makes an impact, and I think the thing that business owners find is when they start to run their businesses from this standpoint, they feel better. Mm-hmm. They enjoy their life more. They enjoy their work more, and they feel a greater sense of purpose. And I think that's one surprising things that organizations find. And again, that's what builds resilient organizations, and that's what builds resilient leaders.
And in my mind, if you think about the trend, I mean, it doesn't matter what you're selling. It doesn't matter if B2B, B2C. It doesn't matter what B2C or anything else you're doing. I mean, the more educated we all become as consumers, no matter what we're consuming, what it comes down to is people are just voting with their dollars. So like,
yeah, they are.
Like this isn't something that you can like miss and still get it right long term. Like you have to start thinking about this now. You should have been thinking about it years ago, but if you're not, you should be now, because it's not. The more educated consumer gets, the more these other companies are going to come up and I hate to use this term, but eat other businesses' lunch or whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. But it's like the voting with dollars is big.
Well, that's huge. I mean, and so many organizations have missed the mark on that. But it's starting to come along. Consumers now have a stronger voice, and I think it really shows. I was thinking this morning about Amazon, and I'm like, how much loyalty do we all have to Amazon? If an alternative came up that we liked more, that felt that more connected with us, would we all shift? Probably. And so even these big corporate organizations, if they're not really creating, and connecting with all their stakeholders, no one's really safe in that. There's a really great story about Whole Foods. Whole Foods is really focused on, community from when they were a first store. Their first store got completely flooded, and they lost all of their inventory. It was an issue, and they were like, we're done. And they literally went to the store to start cleaning up and close out. The entire community showed up to help them rebuild, and they wouldn't have survived without that. But that's because they put that investment into their community.
Yeah, I love that story.
That's the power of this. So.
Yeah, I love it, and it's true, and I can tell, and I've worked for different companies and different things, and I've seen when a company did it right or didn't do it right, and I can really tell. So I love it. All great stuff there, Morgan. So that being
one
said,
last thing, I know we're limited on time, but I just want all the listeners to know this can be applied to any industry. You can be a retailer, you can be in sales, you can be in software, you can be in products. It doesn't matter. All your business practice, from your sourcing to how you treat your employees to your manufacturing, all of it can be run through this process. So it's not industry specific.
I love it. So that being said, final questions, two-part questions. So number one, what are the right types of companies and or clients for Intrepid Coaching Group? Number one. Number two, what's the best way for them to follow up?
Yeah, absolutely. So any organization that's wanting to shift towards more of a conscious model and capitalize on business, like proven business practices that can both enhance their leadership, improve their product, improve their engagement with their stakeholders, all stakeholders, including their clients and customers. Anyone who's really interested in exploring what that's look like and understanding what the ROI would be like that for their business and how much more fun they might have running their business from that perspective. And to your second question, people can reach me through my emails best at morgan@intrepidcoaching.com, or they can feel free to check out the website, intrepidcoaching.com.
Fantastic. Well, hey, Morgan, been great having you on the show today. Appreciate you coming on and telling us more about what you're doing over at Intrepid Coaching Group, but also using business as a force for good. I mean, great dialogue around that. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review on the Apple iTunes Store. If you're watching this from our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Money, definitely give us a subscribe there, but also leave us some comments on the comment section. I mean, love to know what kind of things you're working on and what kind of projects you have going. And Morgan, thanks again for coming on the show.